A driver acquires habits, number one. These habits could be either high risk or low risk.
I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to break the law today. They just get behind the wheel and they just get relaxed.
If you're in a car by yourself, it's easy to get in a hurry, and it's easy not to be courteous if you don't have to talk to someone face to face.
And see, once this permeates our traffic, we're all in trouble. If you don't mind and the peer pressure of the other drivers out there doesn't affect you, wow, we've got chaos.
We have a great system in place for accommodating everyone. Red lights, green lights, on-ramps, off-ramps. The way our roadways are designed, they'll accommodate all of us if we all make a conscious effort to obey the rules of the roads. Otherwise, those same shortcuts that we may take, other drivers are taking as well, and that contributes to the gridlock.
When we get in our car, we're a little bit selfish. And we get out there and we say, well, I have to go someplace, not realizing and not giving the benefit to the other drivers that have to be someplace too. I would like to see everybody be a cooperative driver. And we work as a team then. You know, you take a basketball team or a football team, any individual can go out there and be the star. But in order to make the team really work good, everybody has to work together. They have to cooperate.
You let people in and you're still going to keep moving forward. I've just made life a little bit easier for my fellow driver. He has his turn signal on. Come on in front of me. What's that going to cost me? A second of time? But it's going to make a difference for him because all of a sudden somebody's nice to him, lowers his blood pressure, there's less rage on the road.
So if you had a chance to give somebody a $20 bill that really needed it, would that make you feel good? Well, we have the opportunity to really help people out by being courteous. It's like giving them this $20 bill, except that we still got our $20 bill, so it's not costing us anything, and it's making us feel a lot better just to be courteous to someone. It's a gift that we really give ourselves and help somebody else out.
Courtesy is contagious. And if you are courteous to somebody else out on the highway, they'll remember that and be courteous to another person. And if we could get that permeate throughout society, and everybody was driving courteous on the highway, we wouldn't need the traffic laws that we have.
Many of us can say, I've never had an accident before and I've been driving this way for years, so it must be fine. But for some of us, the reason we haven't had an accident is just a matter of chance. We haven't been in that situation where we've had to react or take defensive action or evasive action. Because we've been doing something for years and it hasn't met with catastrophic results, doesn't mean that it's a good driving habit.
There's always risk out there. You never drive one moment without being exposed to risk. Most crashes have at least 9, 10 risk factors that combine. These risk factors are very, very minor things. Perhaps a driver driving a few miles an hour too fast, driver having low tire pressure, a driver approaching a curve, left curve in the road, maybe a downgrade, but there's no consequences because the elements did not combine at that time. So a driver going into a curve too fast could get away with it 1 time, 2 times, 10 times, 20 years. And then all of a sudden they hit a patch of sand going into that curve. And all of these factors now are going to contribute to that particular collision. So we never know all of the risk factors working against us. That's why drivers need to know how they could develop habits that are going to give them that risk management capabilities. We can't do anything about all the other drivers out there, but we could do something about ourselves. And that is to empower ourselves with some pretty good habits.
So when I get into the car, I just remind myself of habits that I have. One of the habits that was real hard for me to break was tailgating. I just forget that I'm tailgating. I'm in a hurry, the car's not moving fast enough in front of me, and I get up there.
Probably the single best thing you can do is give yourself enough space between you and the car in front of you to assume they're not going to do the right thing, and make sure you have some place to go, make sure you have enough room, enough space to stop without hitting the car in front of you, enough space to slow down gradually before you stop so you don't get rear-ended by the car behind you. If you're too close behind a vehicle ahead of you, you may not see an object in the roadway that driver sees and is planning on reacting to when they get to a spot where they can actually change lanes to go around it. And now you're there and this hazard's directly in front of you, and you haven't seen it, and you don't have enough time to react to it because you couldn't see around that vehicle in front of you. So you want to make sure that you always think to yourself when you're driving, do I have enough time to safely slow and stop if a hazard were to suddenly appear in front of me?
That's like money in the bank. It's a gift you give yourself. If you keep that space, you're so much more relaxed. You're able to isolate yourself from the high stress that other drivers could generate when they stop fast and you have to react to it.
One of the real big problems I believe that people have on the road is they're very short-sighted. They're looking right in front of their car instead of looking 2 to 3 blocks down the road. When you're looking right in front of you, you're not seeing the big truck that's pulling out or things that are going on in front of you. People tend to just look straight ahead. That's why we have mirrors. You should be moving your eyes every 15 to 30 seconds. Sidewalk, mirror, front of you, mirror, sidewalk, so you get the big picture.
Basically, by looking out to your target area, we're seeing into our future. And if we could all see into the future, imagine the good decisions we could make. Imagine if you were to buy stocks and you could see into the future 10 seconds before that stock is being traded, and you know exactly what it's going to do before you make that investment. Well, it's the same thing when we're looking out into our target area. We're seeing into our future. We're seeing into the future space we need to occupy 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds ahead of time. That's going to make us a winner.
We have visibility. We have to control our visibility, our time, and our space. When you put yourself in the other person's blind spot, you're putting yourself at risk. If they have to suddenly make a movement and they have to swerve either left or right, you happen to be in their blind spot, they're going to hit you. It's not because they want to hit you, it's because they have reacted to some other type of a hazard. If you could just move your car back a little bit or move your car forward a little bit.
If you're driving near a larger vehicle and you have an accident with them, chances are they're going to come out better than you are. So to avoid being in that situation, drivers of passenger cars have to understand that the drivers of those larger vehicles can't always see around their vehicles. So as a general rule, I usually will stay just behind them if I'm overtaking and passing a larger vehicle until there's enough space in front of me in my lane to allow me to pass that vehicle without driving next to it for miles at a time.
I've been in the trucking business for 25 years. We drive for a living and safety is our priority. But our biggest concern is the visibility around our big rigs when we're on the highways sharing them with cars. Let me take you up in the cab and show you what I'm talking about. Now we're sitting behind the wheel in the normal driving position as a driver would sit going down the highway. And you need to keep one thing in mind. The truck driver sits about 6 feet higher off the ground than you do in your automobile, and he has a panoramic view and can see for miles, and he can see across the top of traffic. Now drivers are taught and they practice to look in their mirrors every 5 seconds. So I'm going to look in my left mirror and I see it's clear. I can make a left-hand lane change. I look back across my panoramic view, everything's fine over there. I check my right mirror. Yes, it's clear also, so now I can make a right-hand lane change if I need to. Now that you've been in the cab and have seen what the driver can see, this is what the driver didn't see. Keep one rule of thumb in mind when you're traveling with big rigs on the highways. If you can't see the driver's face in this mirror, the driver cannot see your vehicle. These vehicles are also in the area known as the no zone. Behind the truck, there are 2 vehicles also in the no zone. If you are following a truck closer than 4 seconds, you're in the rear no zone. There's also a no zone in the front of the truck, an area where the driver cannot see the car in front of him. So when you're passing a big rig, don't cut back over from your lane change until you can see the full truck cab in the inside rear view mirror of your car.
Along those same lines, with larger vehicles, buses in particular, they have other hazards, and that is passengers getting on and off. That vehicle can be stopped somewhere along a curb, and whether or not they have the lights flashing on that bus, there's always a risk that someone is going to be crossing in front of or behind that bus, and they may not be paying attention to passing traffic, or they may assume the traffic is stopped.
Slow down. That's the biggest thing. Slow down. And again, assume that the pedestrian is going to step out in front of you. The law states they have the right of way. When I'm driving and I see pedestrians, I'm assuming that they know they have the right of way and that they're going to insist on it. So I drive a lot slower. Bicycles have to obey all the same laws we do. They have just as much right on the highways as we do. Bicycle riders are supposed to stay to the right, but there's times when they're going to have to be in my lane or over into the far left lane. I try to give them more distance than I do regular cars. Things can go wrong with bicycles. With cars, at least you have metal around you. With a bicycle, they're out there with nothing.
People have to realize that California leads the nation in motorcycle registrations. And so there's going to be a lot more motorcycles here than they will find in other places. They have to share the road with that motorcycle, and it's going to take a little extra caution on their part to double check their blind spots. A common mistake made by the automobile driver, they will enter the left turn lane and observe a car come approaching them from the opposite direction. And then they will anticipate that car clearing them and immediately start their left turn without checking the other lanes that original car had blocked out. So when that car passes their location, what they need to do is just take that extra second so they can double check the other lanes and make sure there isn't a motorcycle that's going to cross their path as they make their left turn. In many motorcycle versus car crashes, the motorcycle has ended up in the blind spot of the car. So the drivers do have to take a look over their shoulders, either left or right, and look through those side windows to make sure that a motorcycle isn't there. If they don't have those habits, eventually they're going to lane change and the motorcycle is going to be there. Something I see quite often on California freeways are automobiles following motorcycles too closely. A good motorcycle rider on today's motorcycle can outstop a car. I realize that the recommended following distance is 3 to 4 seconds as you're traveling down the road. However, with a motorcycle, you may even want to extend that just a little bit more. Motorcycles can outstop you. So if you allow yourself just a couple of more seconds beyond that, you can certainly avoid a lot of potential accidents.
Many drivers are under the impression that if the sign says that this is a maximum speed limit, that you can drive at that speed under all conditions. And it's just the opposite. That's the fastest, or that's the maximum speed that you can travel under ideal driving conditions. So when you have adverse weather, tell yourself, if a hazard were suddenly to appear in the roadway around this next curve or just ahead of this vehicle that's in front of me, or if that vehicle in front of me were to suddenly stop, would I be able to safely slow down and stop without hitting that hazard?
Rain gets no respect. It's sort of like the Rodney Dangerfield of the weather conditions, you know. If it's snowing and icy out, we say, hey, it's snowing, it's icy, I better be careful. So we have a visual cue that this could be dangerous for us. But when it's raining, it's just raining. And drivers don't appreciate the fact that their envelope of traction, the control that they have, is going to be greatly diminished because of that rain.
When it's raining, not only can you not see, now the road is slippery. And people are driving like it's a beautiful, sunny, hot day. It's not. You've got to take so many things into consideration. You've got to keep that distance. You've got to slow down. And you can't make sudden moves with the car because you're going to spin out of control.
And if you take a look at any intersection, it's where you're going to have a lot of oil deposits on the road. And when it starts to rain, the water is heavier than the oil, so the oil is going to float up to the top. And a driver now coming into that same intersection, when it just begins to rain, trying to stop as they may be accustomed to, at the last moment slamming the brakes on, now hits this little layer of oil-water mixture, and they're going to slide and possibly crash into the car in front because they don't have the good habit of stopping far enough back. So they're victimized by their bad habit.
If you're driving in adverse conditions, whether it's snow or rain, and you're approaching a curve, you want to start braking before you get to the curve and try to negotiate the curve without using your brakes as much as possible or using them very lightly. So you want to brake in a straight line as much as possible.
And as weather conditions change, it's raining all day, the temperature has dropped down to 30 degrees. Now we have some freezing water. We have some loose water on top of freezing water, and a person's going to go into that curve. It's like playing Russian roulette if you don't reduce your speed.
When the roads are wet, icy, or snowy, speed is your enemy. Reducing your speed, giving you more time to react to hazards, and that is a secret to safe driving. Avoid skids. If you get into a skid, either a broadside or a locked wheel skid, that's an enemy because you've lost control of your car.
If you do find yourself in a skid, best thing you can do is get off of the brakes. Even though you might be thinking to yourself, I won't have enough space to stop, if you keep skidding, you definitely won't have enough space to stop. It'll take you a much further distance to bring your vehicle to a stop if it's sliding than if your wheels are actually turning.
The major thing that you have to do is concentrate on your steering, because that's what's going to give you the best chance to get out of the situation. So we always concentrate on trying to get the front of the car to go where we wanted it to go in the first place. Steer the front of the car where you wanted it to go before it started to skid. And if you're going into a curve or up over a hill crest, you don't know what's on the other side. So there's two things you have to do, and it has to take place automatically. Reduce your speed and give yourself the curiosity to ask what's on the other side, rather than assume it's going to be okay. And if we're asking ourselves the right question, we're going to see the information a lot sooner.
When something occurs in front of you, you want to have some other option available besides slamming on the brakes. So once a person identifies a potential hazard, there's basically four options they have to avoid a collision. One would be the brakes. Another one would be steering either to the left or to the right. And then a fourth option would be to speed up. So they need to start thinking about, well, what can I do besides slamming on the brakes? A lot of times steering out of the way, steering up on the shoulder of the road, maybe hitting a paddle marker or a guardrail rather than rear-ending another car. Now, those are options that are available if we would think about them ahead of time.
Maintain your car, make sure it's in good running order, and that means not only the lights, the tail lights, the engine, the tires, but make sure the windshield is cleaned.
We found that if the tires are more firmly inflated, you're able to have better steering capabilities with that handling characteristics with the car. So it's one of the cheapest things that they could do for preventive maintenance is keep the proper tire and pressures.
If you feel a catastrophic tire failure while you're driving, the best thing you can do is to gradually come to a stop. Avoid locking up the brakes again, because you may end up losing control of the car. Just take your foot off the gas pedal, make sure you have a firm grip on the steering wheel, and coast as much as possible if you have space. If you need to use the brakes, just use them lightly. If you're on a freeway or if you're in a bad spot, move your vehicle onto the shoulder, and then drive nice and slowly with the flat tire to a safe place.
When we have a brake failure, something that we fail to do is look at other alternatives to avoid the crash. We panic. You can always shift down into a lower gear. There's always an emergency brake that you could use. You can always use steering as an option. So those are some things we need to think about if the brakes go out. Sometimes the brakes go out, it just means that they've lost some fluid and that extra pressure is necessary.
Usually, if you have a power steering or brake failure, it's because you have engine failure as well. If you can continue to control your vehicle and move onto the shoulder and coast to a stop, that's fine. If your vehicle comes to a stop and you're in the traffic lane and you can't move it to the shoulder because of engine failure, then you're best off turning on your four-way flashers, and then moving away from the vehicle onto the shoulder yourself and calling for assistance. Immediately after the accident happens, if no one's injured, and it's a property damage only collision, meaning that it's only the vehicles that have been damaged, then it is okay to move those vehicles out of the roadway. Many drivers are under the impression that they have to preserve the scene. If someone's injured and they can't be moved, yes, you'd want to leave those vehicles there. But otherwise, if everyone's fine, there's nothing wrong with moving those vehicles out of the traffic lane. The last thing you want is to have another accident. You'd also want to exchange information with the other drivers if there are other drivers involved. And we all have a responsibility. When we think of the term hit and run, we think of someone actually fleeing from a scene in a hurry. But that also covers things like your responsibility to exchange your personal information as far as the information on your driver's license, the information on your vehicle registration, and insurance information. If you leave the scene and you don't exchange that information, that is considered hit and run, the same as a person that actually flees from a scene.
The term light rail has nothing to do with the weight of the vehicle. Our vehicles are close to 40,000 pounds. Light rail actually refers to the fact that we have shared right-of-way in certain places with a car. We have the right-of-way, plain and simple. Basically, because we can't stop this big heavy train fast. We're not rubber on asphalt, we're steel on steel. Not a lot of friction there. From my personal experience, the leading cause of an accident between a car and a light rail vehicle is people being unaware of where they are. They don't know that the train is there. They don't know the train is coming. I was operating inbound from our Archives Plaza station at about 20 miles an hour, approaching an intersection where the traffic crosses our rails at a right angle, and a lady failed to stop for a red light. She saw the red light just in time to come to a screeching halt directly on my tracks right in front of me. I knew there was no way I'm going to be able to avoid her. I went into full emergency brakes, and I braced myself for the impact. And the most shocking thing about that particular accident for me was there was no impact. My 4-car train just tossed this woman's car aside like it was a feather pillow. But that was just sheer terror. I took a week off from work just to recover from the emotional impact of it. It's still with me. I know that one, absolutely not my fault, but still, to hit a human being, I don't ever want that to happen again. When you're driving alongside of a train in shared traffic, don't linger. Don't stay right next to the train. If you have the opportunity to pull forward in your traffic lane, as long as you're not going to cross in front of us, do so. Don't stay right next to us. We've got a close to a 400-foot long train here, and we can't always see what's right next to us from our mirrors. So if you're going to pass us quickly. If not, then relax, slow down, get behind us. Don't turn left in front of me. My reaction time is pretty quick. Had a lot of practice. But the train is so heavy, it just takes a great distance to stop the train.
From the moment I put the key in till I take the key out, my responsibility is driving that car, and I'm doing everything I can to drive that car as safely as I can.
We never know all of the risk factors that are working against us, but we can know the good habits that we have working for us. So if we realize that we want to be able to protect ourselves, protect our family for the rest of our life as a driver, then we need some pretty good habits.
It's like training or exercising. If you practice those safe driving habits, when that circumstance does present itself, when that bicyclist or that pedestrian does suddenly dart in front of you with that stop sign that you're used to rolling through, if you've developed the habit of stopping at that stop sign, then all that training is paid off. Even in that, just for that one little instant, it's paid off.
But you just have to commit and say to yourself, I'm going to make changes because I want to stay alive. And just do it. And one of the things I do is I sit down and say, okay, here's a goal and what I'm going to change about the way I drive.
The payoff for any one of these habits is that we're going to have control over the situation. And in life, when we have control, we have less stress. And we're not going to be victimized by our bad habits or by somebody else's bad habits. So it's going to make our day a lot better and the quality of our life a lot better by having these habits. But it has to be there every single time. Every single time.